All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of David's Saturday Night Sitback. Tonight, I got sitting across from me Jessica Depatie, and she is a speaker, podcaster, and movie producer. She's a subject matter expert in shadow work, post-traumatic growth, exploring altered states, taboo spirituality, and honoring the ancient ways in the modern world. And you can find out about these topics and more through her podcast, Shadow Work Library, which is on YouTube, Spotify, and probably anywhere you listen, watch, or consume podcasts. Jessica is also the producer of an upcoming documentary called The Dark Night of Our Soul. Jessica was kind enough to give me a glimpse into an extended trailer or a short version of the doc, and after watching it and listening to a few of episodes of her podcast, I can't tell you enough how grateful I am that you are here on my podcast. I'm really excited to see where today's conversation goes. I think that your work is incredibly important, and so I can't wait to dive into it with you today. Welcome to your episode of DSNSB.
I've never heard it said that way before. Welcome to my episode. That feels so nice.
Did it feel okay?
I love it. Yeah,
okay,
I'm gonna steal that if you don't mind.
Please steal it. I steal things from other podcasters, and I think it's research, not stealing.
Thank you for the research, the free research.
Sure, you're welcome. So I wanted to start this off a little bit differently today, and ask you to give the audience a reason why they should stick around for this episode.
Oh, wait, isn't that what you're supposed to do after you listen to the show and you put this together? You're cheating. You're podcast cheating. I love this. I'm stealing this too. You're like, would you put the show notes together for me right now?
If you don't mind, just a quick
love
favor.
this. Oh my God, seriously, I'm so impressed. Yes, so, well, I guess I can say one of the things that people are really interested in when I bring up my work and the work that my team has done is finding a reason why doing hard things actually benefits us, because we know that that's been in the sphere of culture for a while now. Fitness culture, self-help, even spiritual cultures, doing the hard thing is somehow beneficial. And so we wanted to look at, okay, philosophically, why? Why is that? Well, we already have a lot of difficult things that happen to us, at us anyway. And so that's all that we focus on, is really understanding why does that happen? Where does wisdom come from? And how can we utilize the trials of life to grow? And also a really important thing that we can talk about is like, what is growth? You know, that's a word that we throw around a lot. And not defining it may be damaging because there are a lot of assumptions around what growth is, and then there's some realities around what it actually looks like. So do you really want that, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's why you should stick around.
I like that. Thank you. I heard this a new definition of satisfaction recently, that satisfaction is the result of doing something hard. And so if you feel dissatisfied with your life, think about what have you been doing, whether it's work-related, gym-related, podcast-related. And in 2023, I just heard this definition maybe a month ago. In 2023, in terms of hours, quote unquote, worked, was probably, I worked more last year than any other year because I was working full time, podcasting, kept the gym a priority. So I was constantly working. And in hindsight, it was one of the most satisfied years I've ever had. Like I got less sleep and I worked more, but yet I came out of it just like, holy cow, I think I just had the best year of my life. So
yeah, it depends. And I'm really glad that you said that. And then there's another side of the coin, which is the absolute discomfort that comes from doing nothing sometimes. And sitting with that can be really meaningful. As my 2023 was super different than yours. I mean, I think you listened to that last podcast that I did on deafness and insight, where I started off by saying that year I did practically nothing. It didn't feel like I achieved much. And I really took a very prolonged vacation because I was trying to find my creative insight. I was trying to find, and I would start all these things and it felt hard, but it also felt like busy work. It felt like what I need to do right now is just stop doing. And so that is one of the things that we discovered in this pursuit of understanding how does growth happen, how do the trials add to our wisdom. It's very nuanced, and that doesn't mean that there aren't answers out there, but what might be right for you right now, like what might be right for your 2023, might be completely wrong for 2024.
Yeah. Well, we will circle back to this.
Okay.
I have a couple of icebreaker questions for you. You visited Costa Rica in January of 2020, and you made a post about it on your Instagram account that all of the money in the world isn't worth learning the art of living well. Be passionate, but don't be panicky. Before I ask you about the statement, how was that trip?
Wow.
Maybe I thought that was going to be an easy, how was your vacation? You're going to be, oh, it was beautiful, food, beach. But maybe that not so much an easy question.
I'll give you a quick answer. My time in Costa Rica was 6 months apprenticing with a medicine woman and doing daime, which is a form of ayahuasca, every week, if not every other day. It just sort of depended on who was there. And doing ayahuasca every week or every other day, just the sleep deprivation alone is a lot. So how my trip was amazing and life-changing. It was also incredibly difficult, and there's a lot. But yeah, I love Costa Rica.
All right, good.
I have a lot of answers I could give you with how was it.
Good. Maybe I'll bring that up in some form again a little bit down the road when we get into shadow work and whatnot. But this question, I think it will be a little bit easier, is are you happy?
Oh, yes. I'm very happy.
Okay, cool.
I'm very happy.
One of the reasons I wanted to ask you that question is because in your conversation with Rick Alexander, you had a section talking about how people are having a hard time articulating their feelings. And that question I've been asking now for a couple of years. And I've got a few responses that were either just like, what do you mean? Or, huh? And one guy, I forget the exact phrase. I was trying to think about it right before you came over, but I think his answer was like, none of your fucking business.
It feels invasive. It's an interesting question. Yes, because it's so like lovely to ask, are you happy? But it's also really personal, right? And I think there is something about that question that deserves an honest answer. It's different than how are you? Are you happy? It's like, who are you? Why? Why do you want to know that? But yeah, honestly, I'm feeling very happy.
All right, cool. I'm glad I didn't offend you with that question. So take us back a little bit. I wanted to give the audience a feel for who you were and are and how you got to who you are today. So when you think about when you were from birth to like when you graduated, 18, 17, 19 years oldish, was there any pivotal moment that you feel like sort of shaped who you became today?
Oh yeah. So I went to a small Catholic school in Los Angeles from kindergarten through 8th grade, and it was tiny. I think in terms of private schools, it's pretty small, especially being in LA. It's a very small school where I had 30 people in my class for 9 years, right? Those were the only 30 people I basically knew. And from the 4th grade to about the 8th grade, sometimes there's just a kid that is destined to get picked on, and that was me. Aww. And I know, poor little Jessica. It was, I mean, in hindsight, it's because I was kind of cute, and this one popular boy liked me, and then the one mean girl liked him, and it turned into this whole situation where if anybody talked to me, they'd be ostracized. So, but really, I was in complete isolation for 4 years, ate lunch every day by myself, like didn't speak to anybody. And I didn't want to tell my parents about it because I wanted them to think that I was doing well. You know, I felt like I had a lot to prove to my parents, and I'm a perfect daughter, and I got this going on because they raised me to be fairly performative. You know, they were doing their very best, but they also wanted me to be as perfect as possible, lovingly. Yeah. And so I hid a lot of that from them. So after that, going into high school, I was like, wow, it was super traumatic. You know, I didn't know what was wrong with me and what was going on. And so I decided, I remember my first day of high school being like, okay, now I'm going to a bigger school. I'm going to become this person that I think I can become. I'm going to become a charming and gregarious and funny and all these things that I felt like I kind of was, but wasn't really sure because in this such formidable years, I was by myself. And I did that, but I also relied on like drinking and a little weed here and there and some sex here and there and just some of these coping mechanisms to help me break through this very uncomfortable transition from going from somebody who never spoke at all to somebody that was really trying to get in there, really trying to break out of my shell. So in that process, the whole thing, I was very, very aware of my shadow self. And that was like the early phases of understanding that shadow work was a thing. So I inherently felt like there was something wrong with me, and I didn't think that anybody else had it. Like I felt like I was the weird one. I came from a fairly emotionally illiterate household, and I think a lot of the people that I grew up with also did. So talking about feelings wasn't a common thing. So it was stuck in my head, stuck in my room, wondering, I feel like I'm a good person, but why do I feel like I'm a bad person? Why do I feel like there's so much wrong with me? And that was the time where I like the seeds of my life's work started to sprout. It wasn't a long time after that until I really grounded myself into what that even was, but it was definitely the beginnings of it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that that was going to be your answer. And we have a ton in common from the raised in a small religious school. It was Christian, so probably some different methodologies, but there's probably a lot of similarities as well. And yeah, went through a couple-year period of being made fun of, and then finally was able to convince my parents to let me go to the local public school. So I went from being in a class of 80, and they didn't let me go until my senior year. So my senior year, I went from a class of 80 to a class of 800.
Wow.
But it was such a fun year, and I remember spending that summer asking my two people close to me to help me reinvent myself. And for better or for worse, that is what I thought needed to happen, because I was having an identity crisis as a teenager, of not really knowing who I was, but knowing who I wanted to be. But yeah, lots of similarities.
You know, like good for us too.
Right.
You know, we knew that we were suffering. Sure, it wasn't maybe our stuff that we were suffering from. It was a lot of projections around what people wanted us to be like. But I'm sure we had some of our own stuff in there also.
Yeah.
But what a brave thing to do as a kid, you know, coping mechanisms aside, whatever, we self-medicated. I don't know if your story's like that either, but we figured out another path, and that's kind of great.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. My senior year was super fun. I have two friends that I still talk with from that school. I only have one person from the Christian school I talk with, and we're only still friends because her sister married my brother, so the family sort of had a joy. But if they hadn't got married, I probably would have lost contact with her as well.
Oh yeah, I have no
Yeah,
desire to go
that
back.
dude you mentioned, or best friends with the girl that wasn't happy about it.
Nah,
no, okay.
I'm not that holy.
That's funny. So I went back, far, far back on your Instagram, and this is one of the... My caffeinated fingers won't let me pull this picture. That is one of your earlier pictures
Oh,
from 2015, and I'll put it on the YouTube version as well. You can see it right now, and I'll pop it up on there. But that is a little bit past high school, and I would imagine. And I noticed as I went through your pictures, it went very much from fitness social Jessica to it sort of transformed into being all about shadow work. And so when you look at that Jessica right there from 2015 and know who you are now, what do you think one of the biggest differences is? How have you changed over those 9 years?
I'm so glad that you brought up the year. So I was 27 in this picture, and January 2016 was the first plant medicine ceremony I ever had on Christmas Eve. And it was a really beautiful Wachuma ceremony, very mild. It felt like I was in a deep meditation, and it was chill. 2015, Jessica was completely asleep. Like I'm one of the people, and I don't know if this is rare or not. I think a lot of awakening experiences are gradual, like learnings about how you're out of alignment. But for me, this was oh my God, what have I been doing? You know, I need to blow up my life. And yeah, I was at the time engaged to someone that we didn't love each other at all. We had just been together for a while, and we weren't even great roommates. There was so much apathy in the relationship. And yeah, like even this dog in this picture, Maddox, I got him as a coping mechanism. Just like, I need some love, but I didn't even know what I was doing. It was a lot of unconscious movement in my life. But fitness was a really fantastic way for me to get into my body. Fitness is often a gateway into just self-discovery. There's so many people that get into fitness and then get into self-help. It's a really nice natural progression. So for me, this was awesome. It helped me in some ways escape this life that I'd built that wasn't actually my own. That I'd built it, but it wasn't mine. When I finally woke up to all of the pillows that I had on my couch and the little mini mansion that I lived in and all the trips to Home Goods, like, why am I doing this? Who am I trying to prove this to? And so actually fitness, yeah, this picture is interesting. This is one of my later years in owning a fitness marketing company. And it was primarily in like working with supplemental functional fitness companies.
Okay.
So I would help them with their marketing basically. And I did that since I was maybe 22. I started on my own in business, which was really fun. And near the end of it, this was near the end of it, I realized I care less about marketing and sales and a lot more about the people that I'm speaking to. Gym owners are some of the most fantastic people in the whole world. They have such big hearts in general, and they tend to have a martyr spirit to them. They know that they're doing good work for people, and their business acumen isn't great. They tend to focus on the craft of health and fitness. So they would come to me and they'd be like, I need help with my marketing and sales. And be like, well, who are you? Who are you even? Let's figure out what your brand looks like so it doesn't look like the folks down the street. And that was a really intimate process to understand what their values truly were, not based on what CrossFit said, not based on what, Body by whoever said that looks good and has a lot of followers on YouTube and Instagram. And in that process, I was like, wait, who am I even? I can't be asking everybody that question, not ask myself. So that got me like professionally into shadow work because I had understand marketing for so long. And I went to school for journalism with an emphasis in public relations. I feel like I professionally groomed to understand how to find the important aspect of someone's story. And so I just sit there and just marinate in someone's story and be like, oh, that's the thing. Yeah. And that's why I feel like my background in fitness was such an amazing aspect of my life. My journalism degree is such an important aspect of what I do now. Because while I don't have clients in a traditional sense, my journalism background, my ability to, even all that time in isolation, I had to be such a good listener. I didn't have any other option. It just gave me, I think, this toolkit of spidey senses to figure out what hits in someone's story.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned how you feel like gym owners have big hearts. I used to work in a gym, and there is 19 clubs, so it wasn't a big company like a Gold's or a 24. But I knew all 9 of the other 18 managers, and I would say if there's one thing that we all had in common, we all just love people, and we love seeing people get healthier. And we all had the saying, if we had someone that was trying to be one of our senior, our supervisors or like a front desk who was like, why do you do what you do? Or, I want to get up to where you are. We'd always tell them, well, first off, you don't do it for the money. When you can go to fitness for money if you own your own CrossFit box, let's say, as an example. But when you're working for a company like that, I think I was making $16 an hour. So I said, you don't do it for the paycheck. You do it because you love what you do and you love leading a team and you want to see your members get healthier. And if you don't love it, it might not be the job for you because the pay is actually shit.
Yeah. I mean, I would even throw CrossFit gym owners in there too. I haven't met very many CrossFit gym owners that crush it, even though the monthly membership is a lot more usually than your average gym. It goes into extra programming, training their coaches, and yeah, it's a tough biz.
Yeah,
it's a tough biz. You gotta love it. You gotta love people. Yep. Is this my water here?
That is for you.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Let's do this.
I'm gonna change one thing on the camera super quick. So I don't know if this is a good next question to ask, but as I was looking at your
That's a great
Instagram,
lead-in.
I know, right? Well, in comparing your LinkedIn to your Instagram and trying just to learn your journey on my own, one of the next significant things that I think happened to you is you got involved with Special Forces experiences around 2018. Was that
Yeah.
a company you worked for, owned? What's your involvement and what are they?
Yes. Okay.
Is that a good next
It's a
question?
great
Okay, all right.
question. Yes, because almost nobody knows that I do that. So I co-own it. I
Sweet.
co-own it and I created it. I co-created it. I really put a lot of myself into this company, even though it looks nothing like me. So 2016, the year after this, I met Jeff Depatie,
Okay.
my partner. And this is right when I was like, I don't know what's going on. I got to explode my life. Found the guy that I was going to explode it with. And he was in JTF2, which is Canada's Tier 1 Special Forces. And they're Canada's equivalent to our SEAL Team 6, our DevGRU, and they work closely together. So Jeff retired, or he was in the process of retiring, and we're like, okay, what are you going to do now? And he didn't want to get into contracting, and he had a real love of optimization, and he's a real philosophical gentleman, which I found actually, maybe this is obvious, but a lot of people in the military community are very, very wise. They've experienced a lot of life. And if they know what to do with it, it's fascinating. It's fascinating, the stories they can tell, the ability, especially the SF people, the ability to root out a deeper meaning or to solve a problem that almost feels unsolvable, even
Yes.
when we talk about existential things. So I knew that about Jeff, and so we created the Special Forces experience. And the event is called The Process, and that started in 2018. We run one or two every year, and it's basically a simulation of a Tier 1 Special Forces selection process. It runs a span of 8 days. Now it's 5 days, and our next one is going to be in spring of 2025. And we interview hundreds of men each year. We select 30, and they go out into the wilderness. It's truly the middle of nowhere, Canada. And there's usually snow. There's no hint of electricity or toilet or anything out there. And our team included will bring up, I think usually 20 of our team go up there too. And we're up there almost for an entire month setting up. So it's really tough on us
Wow.
too. And it's all about intentionally facilitating post-traumatic growth. It's intentionally facilitating very, very difficult things. Psychologically, we do phobia testing. It's really tough on the body. Emotionally, very, very hard. It tests your belief system. So yeah, it's really fun.
Give me. It sounds awesome. Who is the ideal candidate to be selected to be one of those 30 participants?
Yeah. So we have an extensive selection process. One of the necessities, and I can't share too much because a lot
Sure.
of this involves the unknown. So if people knew how to prepare for it, then you can prepare for it and you can beat the game. But because we keep everything locked away, we'll show on Instagram the first day 0, day 1, we'll show that. But after that, nobody has ever known what we do unless you're there on the ground. So anyway, selection process is somewhat similar, but I will say that you need to have gone through something significantly difficult in your past and have consciously grown from that. So you understand how this process already works. And so this can be an intentionally facilitated challenge of your life, or it can be an unintentional challenge that life has gifted you. And we need that because this event can be really destabilizing. It can break people that haven't gone through, that aren't, I hesitate to say tough, but that haven't gotten a little bit of body and soul hardening. You know, this is not for somebody who's like, has a military groupie mentality and wants to see what it's like to play soldier. This is for somebody that knows the value because he has lived experience of post-traumatic growth and is looking for that next injection of wisdom in his life.
Gotcha. So when I saw the name that it is called Special Forces Experiences, in my head, I think the first assumption I made when I just saw the name of the business was that a requirement to be involved is that you had to be in the military, but that's not the case.
No, in fact, we rarely take people that are in the military, and we definitely don't take people that are training to go into an SF school or go through selection.
Okay.
Because this can be helpful, and we don't want to help people in that because we want military selection to be accurate. You know, we want people to go into that selection, you know, and be a really good operator on the other side of it. So we want them to choose the right people. So we don't take you if you're training. And then if you've already been through the military, it's first of all, it's rare that they want to do it anyway because they've done enough.
Right.
Like
they don't need another 5 days.
Yeah. But there are some guys who are like, you know, I got injured during selection and life got in the way, and it wasn't really the path that I wanted to go down, but I want to know if I would have made it. We get a few of those guys, and that's really cool closure for them too.
All right, cool. So technically, like, I could apply.
Oh yeah.
Because I have no military background. I feel like there could be a little bit of trauma in the past that I've grown from.
We love that trauma.
But, all right, cool. Yeah, I invited someone on the show, and he asked if he could think about it, and
think about what?
If he would come on the show or not.
Oh.
I asked him in person at a gym, and he comes back up to me about 30 minutes later, and he's like, you know, I do have some trauma that I went through that very few people know about, and I accidentally smiled and it said, "We love trauma" on the podcast, and I was like, I could tell by the look on his face, he was like, what?
You know, it's weird how many times I say that. That's not something normal people say, Dave. But then you find your tribe.
Yes, then you find your tribe. And he went and watched a few episodes, and he even made a comment. He was like, I get what you mean now. I see the kind of stories you tell and whatnot. So
I mean, if I can, good for him. And if I could just say this, I had the same exact conversation with my good friend Jillian, where we do love trauma. It's like a insane thing to say, but that's where all the juiciness of life is. And it doesn't condone the bad thing that happened. Right. You know, like some people have some really remarkably horrible stories. And can it also be true that we trade our suffering for wisdom? Like, is it possible that our trauma offers us a kind of formulaic look into what our life's work might be, because that thing is just so impactful? The other option is that it just sucked, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, she and I joke about that all the time. We have like our trauma people. It's weird. I'll go to conferences that have nothing to do with trauma. Like I went to an AI conference the other day, and for some reason, all the trauma people are hanging out together, and we're laughing about it. It's great.
It is. It's good. We love trauma. That might be. I was thinking about one day I might need to rebrand the podcast just because. Who's Googling David Saturday Night Sit Back? You know, but maybe the tagline of whatever the new rebranded podcast will be "We love trauma."
I love that.
Little winky face, a little winky emoji or something. I don't know.
We're gonna have to workshop that.
Yes, we will.
I already love it.
Well, this is a good segue. So I want to jump into shadow work and how you got into it. I will say I'm gonna ask Jessica, what is shadow work? You have a great 8 to 9 minute introductory video on your channel that I watched, where if you've been hearing us say shadow work and just like, what are these crazy trauma loving people talking about, you could go watch that video, and that's a very easy intro that you'll immediately be like, okay, I know what shadow work is now. What did this progression of 2015, 2016, you were engaged, you had the wake-up call, you had the medicine ceremony, and then special forces experiences, and then leading into 2019, 2020, why did you decide to start exploring shadow work?
Well, mind if I fold this up?
You can throw it on the
Thanks.
floor.
I'm just staring at 2015, so I was like, wow, so fit. Damn. So how did I transition into shadow work around that time?
Yeah.
Well, the Special Forces experience is all about shadow work, really. It has the facade of being a military event, but within it, it's actually a deeply feminine event, femininity being defined as a really chaotic force. And so the event is pure chaos, but the chaos is meaningful and it's purposeful and it's specifically directed to break down a masculine ego of having it all figured out, of having a persona that has I'm just going to speak to men right now because men have been in that program traditionally. Putting up a persona that has been really helpful for them for probably all of their lives. And it was helpful until it wasn't helpful. It was helpful up until that gear, as my colleague Rick Alexander says, it just stopped working, you know. And then they look for something to shake it up, right? And so being involved in that organization was really fantastic because I was able to sit across the table in the transition out when these guys would leave, because you can quit at any time. And a lot of the quit function happens early because body breaks down, the mind, like, I just want to go home. I miss my family. You know, I need to call my dad. Like, a lot of these things come up a lot quicker than I thought they would. I thought, you know, day 8 we're having breakthroughs. It's like, it's happening really fast, which is awesome. And to sit there and listen to these gentlemen crying, like ugly crying in this tent in the middle of nowhere, without reservation, was so beautiful to watch. And I was like, I really want to understand this better. I want to understand what's going on here. And I had this, shadow work has always been in my periphery, you know, through what I was telling you about marketing. It's like, to understand ourselves, we need to understand our shadow. To understand the light, we need to understand the shadow. It gives us a more complete vision of where we're coming from, why we value the things that we do, and what values are hidden in there that we're not actually living up to, and all that. So in 2019, this is when I went to Costa Rica for the first time. I was just going on a family trip with my husband, and we were like, let's do ayahuasca while we're down there. We're in the neighborhood. You know, just like some very flippant thing. We had talked about it for a while, and so we brought down a couple of guys from our team, from the Special Forces team, to enjoy it with us.
Yeah.
And my intention for it was, I want to get into this work, and I don't know how or what that's going to look like, but I want some clarity. And also I feel like it's unearned. I never gave that trauma that I was talking about earlier, of being bullied and being isolated for all of those years, any real, like, I always was like, oh, that's just bullying. It's just whatever. I got over it. But I realized how many times that was really stifling my ability to be in friendships with people, to feel comfortable being out alone. So I felt like loneliness was so horrible because I was alone for so long and it felt so bad. And all of these things, so many insecurities I had had, but I was just like, that's not real trauma. Real trauma is all these things that are cool to hear about, the podcastable things.
Yeah.
You know, no one wants to hear about me being bullied. And so I was like, okay, ayahuasca, I want to know what not wanting to live feels like. I want to earn this because I don't feel like I can freely talk about this or work with people if I haven't earned my trauma badge. And in hindsight, that was the most insane intention to have because I got it. Like, I wanted to know what it would be like to not want to live anymore because there were so many people that feel like that. And Dave, I have to tell you, it was like so scary, so sad. And I remember it's could have been 5 minutes in, but it felt like an eternity. Finally just being like, I just want to die. Like, just screaming that, maybe out loud, maybe inside, I don't really know. And I was just like, just kill me. And hearing this voice from somewhere say, oh no, I remember I said, what's the point? Like, what's the point of living? And this voice saying, because you can breathe. And I took this breath, like the most beautiful, like floral breath ever. It was just like filled with all the flowers that have ever existed ever. And it felt like spring in my body. And I just like I felt what God felt like, you know, and people say, I saw God, like I felt God in my body or something. And I was like, oh my God, I breathe, like, and that's why I live. And it just felt like this really profound thing, you know, I breathe, therefore I prosper. And even as I say now, I'm just like brought back to that breath that was like, okay, I feel like I've earned something. And also that experience wiped away a lot of my my self-judgment that I had placed on myself, that I could be a podcaster. Because before then, when I had the marketing business and the SFE, I was producing podcasts. In my marketing work, I worked for Barbell Shrugged, which was the #1 fitness podcast in the world forever. And it was an amazing group to learn from. And I learned some cool communication style and swag there. Or Riz, as the kids say these days.
I hate that word.
God, I hate myself for saying that. I just wanted to try it out, and I didn't like it.
now you know.
Didn't like it. Delete. Yeah, it's a terrible word. Oh my gosh, I just got goosebumps.
I can get you like a shot of tequila if you need.
I gotta go.
Like, wash it out or something. Get some mouthwash.
I hate that. Your dog is just judging me over there. Oh wow, I totally lost where I was going. Oh yeah, so
Barbell, yes, and podcast producing for them.
I'm cool. I promise you, I'm so cool. Yeah, so Barbell was awesome, and then with the SFE, really podcast marketing was our thing. And I was like, who am I to get on this mic and to get in front of the camera? Because I've been such a back of the house person, and so it was cool. It wiped away a lot of the BS that was. It was me standing in my own way, and the podcast was one of the greatest things I've ever done. I started in 2020, still doing it today. And it brings me, thank you. It brings me so much joy and fulfillment and growth. Well, so much growth involved in there.
Knowing where you are now in 2024, you said that the intention that you set for that trip was insane. But this is where you are. If you could have gone back to that moment and changed that intention, would you? Or are you grateful for that experience on the other side of it?
I wouldn't go back into my life and change anything, period. I say that so firmly. It was so crazy. Like if somebody were to ask me, should I have this intention? I would say, hell no.
Right, in the moment.
And for some reason, I didn't tell anybody I was going to do that, which is weird because I'm such an oversharer. But for some reason, I just kept that one to myself. And I know it was exactly what I needed. And still insane. Both of those things can be true.
And still insane. For the listener, if there is someone who, as we talk about shadow work and dark night of our soul, I looked up while rewatching it today the definition of trauma, because sometimes I like to know, to your point, like, what does this mean literally? And the definition of trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. So I thought, what does distressing mean? It's something that causes anxiety, stress or pain, and disturbing defined is causing anxiety or worry. So essentially, if you have been through an experience in your life that caused you anxiety, worry, sorrow, pain, there could be some trauma in your own life and maybe you haven't, because I did a similar thing. Someone said that to me when I was like 28, 29, 30. I was giving them some very specifics about my high school experience, and they said, that must have been traumatic for you. I was like, it wasn't a car accident. Like it was. I just got made fun of, But if it's a different definition than I thought it was growing up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So my favorite definition of trauma, one of them comes from the doc, which you may have heard, which was Anderson Todd's definition, who's a psychotherapist. He's also the co-founder of the Consciousness and Wisdom Studies Lab out of University of Toronto, and he defines it as being a breaking of trust in a way. So you might expect life to go a certain way, and once that trust is broken in a significant way and you're different on the other side of that, life can look a lot different. And I really like that definition because it can be as remarkable, meaning to remark about, as being a Vietnam veteran, right? Where you're seeing a lot of stuff that would be considered, that big T trauma. And I even hesitate to say that because then we're like ranking trauma based on,
Right.
But yeah, some people say like big T trauma. There was a breaking of trust in that person's psyche, because what's also true is if you get certain types of training, like a lot of SF people will go through visualizations, really difficult visualizations around the kinds of traumatic things they might see. And just by expecting it, there's not a lot of PTSD from that thing afterwards. So I'll give you an example of that. In a lot of like ethnic families, spanking your kids is pretty normal. It's something that we grew up with. And so I'm half Korean, and I'm also half white. And in a lot of Caucasian families, it's not as common. But a lot of parents spank their kids. Like if your kid runs across the street and you have a moment and you're like, I need my kid right now to know that that's not okay. Sometimes parents will be like, I'm going to hit you because I love you. You know,
Right.
sometimes there are things like that. I don't totally have an opinion yet because I don't have kids. And I think a lot of things are circumstantial. But there has been research around ethnic families. You might hear, okay, you're going to get the switch if you don't eat your food. And there's a constant talking about getting spanked. And so if you do get spanked, it's like, I saw that coming and it's kind of fine. But if you never have that conversation with your kids and then you get whooped one day, you get spanked, it's like, what was that? Does mom and dad not love me anymore?
Right.
You know, there's a breaking of trust. Whereas in like a stereotypical ethnic family, it's like we see it coming, we know it's coming, and whether that's right or not is a totally different topic. I'm not really talking about that.
Right,
It's
right.
more, it's not a breaking of trust. We just know it's a part of our culture.
Right.
And so there's not a lot of trauma in terms of, I'm talking more like easy spanking, not hurting your kids. You
Right.
know?
There's not bruise. There's not blood. It's a swat on the butt.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Another example, like Jeff will often get on calls with young people who want to get into the SF, and they're really gung ho and they're really into survival skills and really into military culture and whatnot. And you can ask them a very simple question: do you think that you could kill somebody? Do you think that you could look into somebody's eyes and kill them? And that is the one question that has the vast majority of them being like, I don't know, I've never really thought about that before. Isn't that an interesting thing to not think about if you're going to be joining the military? It's wild because that's the thing right there. A lot of these people will go overseas and have to do that thing that's actually why they exist. And we're talking about infantry at least. And they're not really like training for it and visualizing it. And so even though it's part of the job description, the visualization of the possibilities of what could happen are so critical. And yet those have their downsides also because people from the SF may not have the same kind of PTSD as a less trained green soldier that goes in there and has to do the same things. Because with every SF soldier, at least in JFTF2, at least $1 million per soldier is given into their training versus who knows what little scraps are there for the green soldier, right? But they have this then keyed in thing in their personality that are like battle scars, where they will imagine every worst case scenario so that they're not surprised by it. And that kind of life also has its disadvantages, as you can imagine.
Yeah. The when you worded that question, I know you weren't asking me, but you did phrase it as a question. And in my head, I thought, I've never been asked that, never considered it. I never thought about going to the military as a path. I was a college kid and degree in accounting and, joined the business world. But, yeah.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's a big one. And to consider how many people go into the military, I wonder if they could all say yes. And also given there's so many things you do in the military that aren't that also, right? Like a lot of different jobs.
Yeah.
Like my dad, he was a weatherman
Yeah.
in
there you
Nam.
go.
But a weatherman in Nam, kind of badass.
I have a friend who just joined as a fireman for the Navy.
Oh, cool.
And I said, what?
Get the double first responder thing there.
Fireman for the Navy. All right. So I guess if a ship is on fire, he'll be the one putting it.
Yes.
Yes.
Which does make sense now you say it like that. Yeah,
Right.
I think that happens often.
Yeah. Yes, it might. So if you want to take 30 seconds to answer this or 10 minutes, you can go whichever direction you want. What is shadow work?
Shadow work, the term itself comes from Carl Jung. Carl Jung is something that I'm sure a lot of your listeners have heard about recently because he's all over Instagram. He's dead now, but a lot of his teachings are really hot. And I think good for you, Carl Jung. He coined this term and he was a student of Freud. And he coined this term to, I guess, explain the shadow are these aspects of ourselves that we can't see or are incapable of seeing or don't want to see. They're often the aspects of ourselves that we're ashamed of or angry at, But also we have golden shadows, we have positive shadows too,
Hmm.
like little gifts that we don't even see. So there's a lot in there. I think pop culture kind of gets shadow work wrong in a way. So shadow work is then uncovering some of these things and bringing them to light so that we can figure out what to do with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of liken this to having spinach in your teeth, food in your teeth.
Hmm.
It's there. Are you brave enough to look in the mirror and be like, "Oh my God, that's been in my on my face for my entire life"? Because some people are like, "No, I don't want to see it. And I don't even want to know,"
Yeah.
but everybody else can see it. That's one of the things about your shadow is it's can be difficult for you to see, but other people can see it. So it's almost always worth doing the work. And then pop culture, I think they get shadow work wrong a little bit because it can be, yeah, just like how do I fix my shadows? And
Hmm.
at least according to the youngins, there's no fixing it. There's a attending to them, an appreciation of them, an exploration of them, an acknowledgement of them. Of course, we have our decisions that we can make every day, and they can all be positive. You know, like I wouldn't say like a shadow is that you have a murder streak. That's not a shadow, right? Like
Sure.
that's a choice that you're making that you don't have to make.
Right.
But the shadow that's behind that, we could all have that, which is I feel so deeply disturbed by people that hurt me, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And you might always have that, but when you start talking about it and sharing it with people and realizing, oh, a lot of people actually have that too, or going back into your childhood and figuring out where that comes from, you kind of become friends with it.
Hmm.
And then it takes on a different shadows can morph. They can transform. And that's another aspect of shadow work that I subscribe to, which is more of an Eastern context, is that sure shadows will never be transcended, but they can be in their highest state. They can take on different forms. So that shadow of like rejection that I was just talking about, when you realize that rejection hurts you so badly, like more than most people, what do you do with that? Okay, I need to find community. I need to find community. It's just like I'm itching to have friends that are meaningful to me and that I feel are really friends, you know, and don't like me just for aesthetic reasons or whatever. And so community becomes this gift that you're given, you know, acceptance becomes this thing when you see other people that are rejected, you're like, oh, I get you, I get that. And there's ways to relate to people like that. So you can see how by doing shadow work, it can actually turn into some of your greatest superpowers. These things that really bum you out about yourself can transform into aspects where you're like, I'm super proud of this aspect of myself.
Yeah. Um, I I have two follow-up questions. First, for the audience, I scanned all of your episode titles, and you have some specific episodes on the shadows of conflict, another one on the shadow of distraction, the shadow of inadequacy, the shadow of purposelessness. And I want to ask you about sort of how you think they transform. Um, and I'm even like a little nervous just to tell you what I'm about to tell you because it's definitely one of my own shadows. Is that growing up in a Christian school, the thing I was made fun of a lot was being gay, and I wasn't out at the time. I came out much later when I was 25 years old.
Mm.
But since moving to Austin, one of the decisions I made is that I would like to find a future partner organically, whether a podcast guest introduced me to someone, I hit on someone at the grocery store, whatever it may
In the
be,
wild.
in the wild, as they say. So when it was back in like February, and I saw this really hot guy in the grocery store, and I thought I'm gonna go ask him out. And walking up to him, I thought I was gonna puke because everything in my body said this guy's gonna reject you. He's gonna call you a name that you're not gonna appreciate. And so I walked up to him, and I think I just said something like, "Hey, man, do you happen to be single and into other men?" And he sort of paused for a second, and then he said, "Oh, no, I'm not. I have a girlfriend. I'm sorry." And I said, "No, don't be sorry. I just said you're one of the most handsome men I've ever seen in Austin, and I couldn't not find out." And he got the biggest smile on his face, and he shook my hand and said thank you, and we parted ways, and it was a really pleasant encounter. I did the same thing 8 or 9 times, and each one is getting a little bit easier, but that fear of rejection, even at my age now, is still there. So for someone like myself who's listening to this episode right now, I wanted to bring that up for your guys' sake more so than mine. And they do know what their shadow is, and they want to work on it. outside of listening to your podcast, what are some things that they can start to do to transform their own shadows?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. I felt that viscerally, like, because rejection is one of my primary shadows too. And when you saying that, I was like, "Oh my God, you're so brave! I love it! I love it! That's so
Thank
scary."
you. It's terrifying.
Yes,
I was
it's so
like,
good.
after I walked away from him, my hands were literally like, I was like, but I did it.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Okay, so all right, in our Western culture, one of the common ways that we think is I see a problem, so I see my shadow and I need to fix it. I need a 5-step plan to fix this thing. And that can be really helpful sometimes. Like, when you're doing a workout routine, like things that are linear, I'm looking to build muscle. I'm looking to gain 5 pounds of muscle. There can be a certain way that you eat that every day is the same. And that's actually perfect. And you train the same way every day up until a certain point where you need to change things up, right?
Mm-hmm.
The psyche is so different. It's such a fickle little biatch, you know? And it doesn't want you to fix it. It wants to be acknowledged. And what a weird game that is. It's like, no, I see what's wrong here. Let's just fix it. It's like I become the husband in my own experience. I'm like, no, I just want to be acknowledged. No, I want to fix it. It's just crazy back and forth. And the reason why fixing it right away doesn't work is because there's an underlying reason why we're feeling this scary rejection thing. And if we just keep pushing through it and keep pushing through it, the reps might get easier to do, but there's an underlying thing there that really deserves some attention, because that could be the key that unlocks a whole bunch of other ease in our lives. And it's not just this one thing, right? So I say the best way to look at your dog. He's so cute.
Even in the dead of summer, he burrows. And I'm like, bro, it's 112 outside. Why are you under there?
So precious. I love it. Best distraction ever. And okay, I have to stop looking at that. So I can't stop. It's so
I can
comical.
go cover him up.
No,
so he's
this is
not-
great. I have discipline, as much as it doesn't sound like it. So is to notice those feelings, right? I'm sure before you got to the grocery, I would imagine at least, you had a lot of imagining what it would feel like if you were to go do that. There's a lot of imagining, like, what if this happens? And that's all really good. A lot of those visualizations, the feeling, like, worst case scenario, okay, what will that feel like? And like, where is this coming from? And I'm just going to notice you. I'm not going to try to fix you feeling. I'm not going to try to distract you away. And that was one of the shows on distraction. A lot of times these uncomfortable feelings come up and we want to distract them away, when all they need is to be felt at level 100 for a little bit. And it's like, that's actually not so bad. I can handle that. And we call that cultivating pauses. So you may have seen lots of men that were like great potentials and you're like, not today. And that's okay, right?
Yep.
This process works really well with addiction too. You might want that hit of nicotine. And what's a really great process is just to notice that I want this hit of nicotine, and you can go smoke that cigarette or hit that vape. But you just prolong those pauses a little bit longer and longer each time. And you're like, okay, I'm feeling like I want that hit. What does this feeling feel like? Now it's 3 seconds. Now it's 5 seconds. Then it gets to a point where you can consciously be like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Right now is the day that I do it. And it's a really cool way to be friends with your psyche that wants to be acknowledged and doesn't want you to just like punch your way into fixing it, So yeah, that would be my suggestion for people that want to start shadow work. Beginners to shadow work, meaning you've never heard this before in your life, or people that have been on a lifelong path of looking inward, cultivating pauses, that never goes out of style.
Cultivating pauses. I like that. There are 2 particular shadows that we wanted to talk about tonight. That's been top of mind for you, and I'm going to read a little bit here. The loneliness crisis and the mental health crisis. You mentioned to me in writing that so far we've treated these 2 topics like an epidemic. And so what I wanted to talk with you about tonight is So how have we? It's sort of a two-part question, and the first part is how have we treated it so far, and what would you personally like to see change?
So I think the loneliness epidemic and the mental health crisis, I'm going to use those interchangeably.
Okay.
It's, and I'll say that because when we're feeling disconnected, when we're feeling like we don't understand where we are in the plot of our own story, that could be considered a mental health issue. And then that issue has us feeling lonely. Like we could be surrounded by people and still feel like nobody gets us because we don't get ourselves, right? And I think there's a lot of ways that we've been dealing with that. We have a lot of medical interventions, medications to make those feelings go away, and they have some pretty severe side effects. And they also don't take into account, on their own at least, what those feelings are trying to show you and tell you about who you are, and like what juiciness lies in those dark crevices of our human experience. It blocks you from going there. There are times when medications can be incredibly helpful to make sure that that person is stable. And there's some people that need to be on medication for their whole lives, and that's completely okay to be functioning in the United States. You know, maybe in different parts of the country, they'd be more accepted to be how they are, or in different times of humanity. But I think a lot of people take them unnecessarily because it's uncomfortable. Because feeling like shit is uncomfortable.
It is.
You know?
Yes, it is.
We don't like to feel like that. No. And then another thing I'm guilty of, like I watch so much Netflix, it's embarrassing. It is my drug of distraction for sure. I'm feeling something bad coming, I'm like, play. And British Bake Off, so then I eat a lot of food. Like,
oh, you and my sisters would have so much to talk about.
Yeah.
That show is not for me, but they love it.
I don't know. I think it's dangerous in so many ways. It's so bingeable. It makes me so hungry. And then another element of the mental health crisis and loneliness epidemic is suicidality, which is a huge, huge issue. When we start having issues around children and suicidality, we know that there's something wrong. Like that isn't natural. That hasn't been recorded in history in the amounts that we have experienced lately. So what's going on with that? We have a lot of new technology that we're just learning how to play nicely with, and our technology is outrunning our wisdom, and so we're making a lot of mistakes. And we can tell when it comes to the amount of blue light and how we're creating mitochondrial decay in our bodies. And so some scientists are saying that that's causing a lot of issues physiologically, which impacts our mental health. Processed foods, creating gut health issues, which creates mental health issues. So we're like in this perfect soup of a lot of stuff. And so now we're like, okay, we have a mental health crisis. What is also true is that we have so much time on our hands. We have so much time on our hands to think about why we're here and what this all means. Because we have a lot of conveniences. We can go to the grocery and find our food there. And we can drive places, so we get from place to place quicker. And we can call somebody on the phone. If we want to get a hold of them, we don't have to walk over to their hut. So like things are just happening quicker, and then we have a lot more time to fill with a lot of other stuff. But it's almost inevitable that when you have those pauses, that those existential questions creep in. And even when you don't have those pauses, there's like stuff creeping in, right? Why is that? And so I haven't heard this anywhere before, and so it's a theory of mine, and I don't know if it's accurate. But it feels like more than a crisis, this is a calling, because for the first time, these most recent generations, in the West at least, because this is a mental health crisis in the West and in the developed Eastern countries, not in the jungle, not in these places that are living more aligned with the Schumann residents and with nature, but in what the people from the jungle will say is the sickness of the modern world, living so out of alignment. They're praying for us, which is a really cool reframe. It's like, whew, it's a little bit of humble pie there. Sorry, I lost track where I was going with that. It feels like a calling, because for the first time we now have the space to do the work for maybe hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of ancestors that have gone before us that haven't had the time and the space, that have gone through their own wars, that have gone through tribal wars, that have gone through their own familial battles of repression and domestication and genocide and all of these things. It doesn't matter where you're from, you have that somewhere in your lineage, you have that somewhere in your body. There's lots of studies out there that show that their like experiences are passed down through DNA. They have these studies through mealworms and nematodes and I think even rats now, where they'll put like a nematode in a cold environment and they'll put a something that makes it glow brightly if it encounters a cold environment. So then these worms start to glow, and then 10 generations after, these worms have never experienced a cold environment, but they still continue to glow brightly. So the theory is that it still has cellular memory of this chilly vacation 10 generations ago had. It's like stored in its body somehow. So anyway, all that to say, it's, I think, a very calming reframe to consider that the mental health craziness that we're feeling right now may be the legacy that we can leave behind for generations to come after us. You know, like, this is our war. This is our, like, our armor looks like a black t-shirt and a green whatever this is, you know, like it's not sexy. It's not wielding a sword anymore, but our battle is internal now. And we're cleaning up a lot of the stuff that our ancestors simply didn't have the time to do. And they did everything they could to survive. And now we're not physically surviving anymore. So now we're like, okay, all this emotional stuff that they had repressed their entire lives has now been passed down to me. And we're like, what do we do with this? What do we do with all of this? I'm upset for reasons that I don't even think are mine. I just feel sad sometimes. And maybe it's because it's so old. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
Not a psychologist. But what I do know is that it can be, feel like a great honor to be like, I'm going to tackle my inner world. I'm going to love on my inner world. Sometimes it feels like a fight. And maybe that could be my legacy of being like really clear and grounded in this lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a lot to respond to that.
Great. Let's go.
First off, just a quick 60-second tangent, and you may have seen this since you watch Netflix as well. I'm watching Painkiller right now.
I haven't seen it.
Do you know the premise of it? It's essentially about how OxyContin got approved by the FDA and distributed it throughout the U.S. and whatnot. I've had 30 people sit in that chair and tell me that one of the pivotal moments in their life was when they did DMT or ayahuasca or some sort of plant ceremony, which is currently illegal in the United States. And I am on episode 4 of this sort of dramatized documentary, and because you can tell it's made for entertainment, right, between the music and the actors. But as I'm watching this, I'm wondering, like, what percentage of this is accurate? Because this is wild that I cannot go smoke this thing, right, legally smoke this thing, and yet we have people taking this drug that they're getting addicted to and dying. And it is, I almost don't know if watching this show is good for me or not, because it just gets me so irritated.
Yeah.
But that being my we should legalize all plants tangent aside.
No one's getting addicted to ayahuasca, you know?
Right.
That's, nobody wants that.
I looked up some stats for an episode we did earlier this week because I had a teen psychologist come on, and one of the things that she specializes in suicide is suicidality. So according to the CDC.gov, in 2021, 48,183 people died by suicide in the U.S., which is a wild number to me. That's a stadium full of people. That's a small or maybe large army. But zooming out even bigger from that, 1.7 million adults attempted suicide in the U.S., 3.5 million adults made a plan to complete a suicide in the U.S., and 12.3 million adults seriously thought about suicide. So I don't know how they got this data. Like I said, if you want to read it for yourself, it's at cdc.gov/suicide data, I believe. But these numbers blew my mind as I was reading them. 12.3 million thought about suicide. And where I'm going with this is, Have you ever heard of that phrase that most men and women die at 25, but we don't bury them until they're 75?
Mm-hmm.
And that what that's alluding to is I had this moment the other day where someone came up to me in the gym and he was talking to me about how he just recently graduated with a degree in accounting. He has a girlfriend, he's got his post-college job, and he asked me, he was like, I just feel like I'm just doing this thing day after day after day, and I don't have any idea what the meaning. He either said meaning or purpose, but it was a very specific word. And I said, I know I'm a few years ahead of you, but honestly, man, like podcasting has changed my life. The fact that I get to sit across from people like yourself and have these conversations that hopefully have an impact on the audience. And I said, I was an accounting major too, ironically, and I also left that industry because I was bored out of my mind. We need them. So, but it wasn't going to be me. And so I said, I don't have any advice for you except to keep your eyes open, because then I told him that quote. I said, don't be that guy who just goes through the motion until you retire at 65 years old. But I'm curious, what are your 2 cents through your work with shadow work and through the making of Dark Night of Our Soul? Do you have advice better than just keep your eyes open?
Good luck.
Right, and good luck. Do you have some better advice on how do people find their purpose and their meaning?
Yes, I do actually. And it's practical. You know, it's so a lot of times we think of what I want to have more meaning and more purpose in my life. And a lot of people will be like, I need to do something different, or I need to change my job. It's very normal. And sometimes you do. Sometimes you just literally do have to do that. But a lot of times it's understanding why you're doing the thing. And so there's I'll give you 6 different ways you can live out your life's work as an accountant. The first one is if you're a craftsman. Like there's some people that are so interested in their craft and so like for accounting, so interested in numbers and so like, how can I do this faster and quicker? How can I do this? Like, how can I invent a software that can, you know, they're like tinkering in their basement. These are our inventors, you know, and they find their life's work to be in that solitude of invention, right? Of being the craftsman. The second type would be like the archetype of the dancer. I do it because it's easy. Numbers are easy for me. I flow through this, you know, and I inspire people to also look at numbers and look at accounting as if it's not that horrible thing that we all think it is, which I'm one of those people. Numbers are hard for me. So I'm inspired. Passion incites passion, right? And so you flow through it like a dancer, you know, that can be his thing. Role modeling, the smoothness, the style of accounting. The third type would be, well, he's an accountant because it's an experience. He's also a dog walker. He also loves comedy. He also travels to Malaysia. Like it's just one experience because life is filled with experiences, and why not say that I'm a master of accounting, you know? So it's all about like all these little experiences equaling a really meaningful life. That's a kind of life's work there. The fourth one would be the people. Some people do what they do, not because they give a crap about accounting, but because of the clients. Like I make this person's day so much better by helping take this off their plate. And that makes me so happy. And people will invent reasons to work with this kind of accountant because they know that they're really there for them. They're a person of service, and their healing tool is numbers, you know, and taxes. And then the fifth kind is a person who does his work because he's a fixer. You know, I want to fix your problems. I know that you have a problem. The interaction is kind of secondary. It's not like the fourth kind where it's about the friendship. This kind is like, I see you struggling and I find purpose in optimizing and helping and being a leader in the situation. And so his body can feel really good in acknowledging the impact that he's made in his client's life. And then the sixth type of accountant, and also this isn't about accounting, anybody, these are archetypes, right? The sixth type is the teacher. So I will learn accounting as the tinkerer, as the one that flows through it with ease and makes it sexy, as the one who uses it as a means of like gaining new experiences in life, as one who makes friends with it, as one who fixes people's problems with it, and learn this all throughout my lifetime and then teach it and create other, like a self-sustaining program for people to be able to fall in love with accounting. You know, like this type of person wants to empower people to feel good about like their role in society, you know, like not to be so scared of accounting. So they'll create a school for accountants, basically.
Yeah.
So let's say that your friend had to be an accountant. You know, there's so many different ways that he could embrace this as being a way that fills him up, you know. This podcast, if you were a tinkerer, you'd be like, having guests is great, but I'm really into the technology. I'm really into like the analytics. I'm really into like, you know, how it can grow. Yeah, and if you're a fixer, you do this podcast because it fixes people's problems, right? Like, it's one thing, but there's so many different ways we can look at why one does it.
Yeah. Do you recall what number 3 was again?
Yeah,
That
so
was the-
it's the archetype of the changer. And this is an interesting one. A way to know if this is your kind is if you're funny. Like, people are often, a lot of comedians have this archetype deeply ingrained in them because they have the ability to see a lot of things. Like when you have a lot of life experiences, you can see a lot of different perspectives, and then you can put them together in ways that make sense for people, and it's resolved through laughter, right? So yeah, this kind of archetype is really interested in a trial and error life. You know, like I'm gonna try this, see if I like it. I'm gonna try this, see if I like it. And it's constantly changing. And it doesn't mean that there isn't stability for that person. It just means that that stability needs to be refreshed a little bit more often than your like average person.
As you were talking about that one thing about me that's been on my mind this week is I'm going to this professional networking event for my day job this coming Saturday, and I already know that there's going to be a lot of people asking like, what do you do? You know, and I was thinking about how I haven't done something like this since before COVID, and so to say like I'm a recruiter just feels like that doesn't really define me at all. So then I was like, maybe I'll say I'm a recruiter and a podcaster because that's true. But even then, I'm still only assigning these 2 roles to David. I do think that I can be funny. I also know I'm very kind. I'm very empathetic. I'm a good listener. And so I'm probably overthinking it too much. But like to your point, we sometimes put these like titles on ourselves, and it's not necessarily wrong, but we're so much more than an accountant, a documentarian, a recruiter. And I almost was thinking about maybe saying like, I sit across from people all week and ask them questions they don't want to answer. And then just have them be
You sound like a police officer.
Right, they can assume 12 different things from that.
I like that. I like that.
But anyways, that was just sort of what went through my head as you were talking about changers.
You're not overthinking that at all. I mean, this is like, who am I? That's the question of life sometimes, isn't it? And to answer that as like, oh, I'm just, I'm a changer, you know, or I'm a teacher. It's too simple. So a lot of this is based in astrology. So I could tell you what your chart says, and then you could see, does this fit for me? And if it doesn't, it does. And if it does, it's like, okay, that's interesting, because then you can laser focus in on, all right, if I do this for the people, how can I really like lean into that? You know?
Yeah.
It's a fun exercise.
All right. We might have to do that sometime.
Yeah. Oh, let me know. It'll take me seconds.
What I want to talk about Dark Night of Our Soul before we wrap this thing up.
Yes.
It was beautiful. I got tingles at one point the first time I watched it. I can't wait to see the full version when it comes out. So thank you for what you're doing with that project. Why did you want to make this?
Yeah. Well, the Special Forces experience was designed around intentionally facilitated post-traumatic growth. Now, even the words post-traumatic growth is a combination of words most people haven't heard. We've heard PTSD, but there is another side of this coin. And it's something that we all know. You know, we know that through the trials of life, that's where wisdom comes from. But we don't really know how that works. And so in, I think it was 2022 maybe, my husband was diagnosed with severe PTSD from spending years in the military, blast injuries, traumatic brain injury. So, and we separated. It became, I mean, his nervous system exploded. I can laugh at it now because a good way to resolve trauma is to laugh your way through it and to like understand that this is all okay too. But yeah, his nervous system just like exploded, and then mine was just, I wasn't able to hold space for that, and so I had to leave. That would be one of those things where if you ask me if I regret anything, I do wonder about that one, but I don't think I could have stayed.
Yeah.
I don't think I could have. So, but early on when he was diagnosed, we also knew that from his military experience, he also gained a lot of wisdom and a lot of inner strength and a greater appreciation for life and more intimate connections with others and a whole list of really positive things. So how could both be true? Like, what was all that other stuff? Yeah. And so then we found the term post-traumatic growth, which was interestingly named at the same time, or discovered more or less, as PTSD. They were discovered at the same time. And rightfully so, we can understand why PTSD really took off. And also there's a lot of money in that industry. Whereas post-traumatic growth, not a lot of people lobbying for how your trauma may actually hold some of the greatest secrets to why you're on this planet. And it's also controversial, right? Because it could, to some people's ears, imply that we're condoning the bad thing that happened, which is not what we're saying. It's like, if it happened, okay, what do we do with the leftovers? So in understanding that post-traumatic growth is a thing, it's scientifically validated, and not like I need that anyway, but there's thousands and thousands of stories of mythology and lived experiences of people past and present who have grown in exponential leaps and bounds after experiencing something traumatic. We can even look at collective traumas, like genocide, like natural disasters. We almost always see a gathering, a grouping, a leap in consciousness with people getting together and praying or supporting each other and doing things they would never do if the bad thing didn't happen. Greater connection, like really getting down to the things that actually matter in life. And so that was a thing that we wanted to study for our own well-being. Like, okay, PTSD is a diagnosis. Let's self-diagnose with post-traumatic growth also. And like, what is that? So we went on this 5-year exploration of meeting with scientists and philosophers and religious leaders and storytellers and professors and all kinds of cool people. And, and like medicine people as well, to get their take on why does going through something hard here's actually our log line. Which I'm forgetting, but it's basically like, is it possible? Okay, is growth after trauma something that's reserved for a lucky minority? Is it something that's bestowed on people by chance, or is it something that can be like available for everyone? Basically, is it a possibility or is it a probability that we grow after trauma? And it seems like it's probable. We're adaptable creatures. Right, we're constantly going through little stressors all day and every day that we adapt to and we survive and thrive through. We are the ancestors of the survivalists out there, right? Yeah. And we've created all these great mechanisms to stay alive. And so we're just taking basically some of this mythology and some of the science around like hormesis and whatnot and bringing it to the forefront to show that there is a silver lining to the difficulties that we see in our lives. And like, it's a really precious thing to acknowledge in our human experience rather than something that we might need to medicate away too soon before we really know what it's asking of us. Yeah. So yeah, then we created a documentary.
I can't wait to see the full thing. To your point about how some people, when you made the comment about, are we endorsing trauma, you reminded me of someone on the show who talked about her experience of being molested at 4 years old. And without me having to ask her at the end of the episode, she said, it's one of those things, I would never touch that incident because we have no idea what butterfly effect that had on me meeting my husband and now having my 2 kids that I love more than anything in the world. And if that hadn't happened, what if I never met my husband and then I didn't have my 2 kids and my life could look completely different? And so I think I've asked that of almost every single guest on the show. And my sort of takeaway from 2023 was actually sort of similar of having this reshaped perception on the quote unquote bad stuff that happens to us. And even saying bad stuff, like, yes, it's terrible that children are getting molested. That's definitively bad, but we have no idea if we can find the resources and the right people to work through that, how much more powerful we might become because of that, whatever that was.
Yeah, I mean, we were just to use that example, a lot of things like that happen are happening because of unresolved trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's possible, I mean, this is our theory, and the reason why we've spent so much effort and energy and money into this project. There are there's a lot of crazy shit that's happening out there, a lot of bad decisions that are being made, like the one you're talking about, and a lot of political decisions that are being made that are pretty short-sighted, but they're being made by humans that have, I'm sure, just unresolved aspects of themselves that are really distorting their reality. And that butterfly effect is really hard on everybody, like if you and I were to go our whole lives without looking into our inner worlds and doing some of this work, we could hurt a lot of people without meaning to.
Right.
So this legacy that I keep talking about, we can focus on environmental issues, we can focus on political issues, we can focus on suicidality. But to me, if we don't start talking trauma, if we don't really start working on ourselves and resolving some of this stuff so we can see more clearly, that's all, we're just band-aiding a lot of stuff. Those bad decisions happen because of distortions of what reality is, not being able to feel our feelings, so we impose it on other people.
So someone sits down and they watch The Dark Night of Our Soul and credits are rolling. What do you hope to be going through their head?
Yes, that a reframe of the possibility of growth after trauma. And it might seem like a really small, I just want you to believe that it's possible. Because that's where it really starts. Whatever road that takes you down, whether that's traditional therapy, whether that's reconnecting with your parents, whether that's going outside for the first time in 5 years, that's not for me to say. We're a solution agnostic organization. The only thing that we're focusing on is letting you know that there is a possibility that you can grow from the thing that felt unbearable.
Yeah, that's awesome. It will.
Yeah, cool.
We've talked about a lot in a short time, and if I haven't said it yet, thank you so much for being here tonight. We still have a few minutes left, but before I ask my questions, I always just like to make sure, have we covered what you wanted to cover tonight?
Well, if you'd like to, okay, let me think. Yeah, I feel like we have. Yeah, we've covered everything.
I don't believe you.
I know.
It sounds like you're coming back for a part 2.
I hope so.
That's what I would love to have you back, especially when it's live and we can talk about what's happened, because it sounds like it could take a couple of months. So maybe, yeah, let's have you back.
That'd be great. So I don't know when this is going out, but on March 10th during South by, we're hosting a screening here in Austin. So if you're in Austin, please come check it out. It's at VUCA at noon on March 10th.
Right on. And to the audience, before I forget, this has been, for me, a very special episode where we talked about the kind of things that I'm most passionate about. So if you've spent the last 80 minutes with us and liked it as well, and are part of the 80% of the audience who is not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, or given us a 5-star review on Spotify, or given us 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, just know it means the world to me, because I'm delusional that this episode will reach someone who is at the height of their trauma, and that this 80 minutes could be that candle in the darkness for them, that reframe reframes their mindset so that they can go do some of the things Jessica just mentioned. Maybe it's stepping out the door for the first time since COVID. Maybe it's talking to a friend about things that you've never shared out loud with someone before. But please support the show and help us spread this to as many people as possible by doing one of those three, if not all three, actions that I just requested of you. With that being said, one thing I wanted to make sure to tell you is that from where I'm sitting, I feel like you're on the right track.
Thank you.
So keep going, please.
How did you know I needed to hear that?
I just knew.
Thank you.
You are on the right track. Your work is amazing. I feel like we need more people studying the things you're studying, talking about the things that we've talked about tonight. As we were talking about those numbers about suicide, I was wondering how many people have not talked to anybody and they're just holding that thing inside. Talking is healing. Even that story I told you from the grocery store made me feel like a fraction more confident in who I am as a person. And I remember the first couple times that I told people that I was gay. It was a lot of ugly crying and really messy. And now I can talk about it with a lot more confidence. And it even made me think when you were talking about some of our ancestors, I've heard on other podcasts, their storytelling abilities, how much less trauma did they have because it was just part of their culture to tell each other everything.
Oh,
I've heard
interesting.
stories like when warriors got back from war, the first thing they would do, even before seeing their families, is they would make a bonfire and they would all just share their experience about that war that they just came back from.
Yeah.
And so when you were talking about us fighting our war, it just made me hope that more people start talking about whatever it is that's bothering them.
I think this is a beautiful time to be alive.
I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Let's see. So one thing that I've been doing differently in 2024, and it's a tradition I think I'm going to keep going, I like it, is I ask in the show by asking you a question that I liked from another podcast, and I want to see how you might answer it. So the one that I'm going to give you that I think would be good is... There's a couple I would like to ask you. All right, let's go with this one. It's a two-parter. For part one, what's the worst advice you ever received?
This was recently. I was sharing with somebody that so I'm kind of new to Austin. I've been here for a year. And I was like, I just haven't really found my people yet, and I don't want to fake it. And I'm incapable of faking it, I love like real intimate conversations. And he was like, sometimes you just gotta fake it, just fake it, and you'll get used to it. I was like, oh, I hate that. What? Just fake it, you'll get used to it. I did one of those slow backward walk into the bushes.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Got it.
Sometimes that advice it could be true, but not in this case. When did you move to Austin?
Like a year ago, a little over a year ago.
Okay, yeah, we've been here about the same amount of time. I got here December 27th, 2022.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know if you will like or hate this advice, but one thing that I did, because I moved here and knew nobody, was I told myself every day when I walk out that front door, I have to meet someone. Even if it's a small encounter in a grocery store and we never see each other again, I have to talk to someone. And to remember them, I have a note in my phone of every single person that I've met, and it's over 200 people at this point.
Ooh, that's great.
And some of them have turned into beautiful friendships as well. So maybe something you could try for yourself.
I love that. That sounds really scary. I'm going to do it.
It's terrifying. And now it's second nature, and I just find myself just doing it sometimes. So the second piece of that question is, what is the best advice? I forgot this was the second part. What is the best advice that you can offer me, David, on how I can improve?
Wow. Well, and how you can improve. Well, I don't know you that well. You let me talk this whole time. Give me a second. I really want to think about this, okay? I don't want to give you bad advice.
She's going to tell me to get more podcast tech because I don't have enough yet.
Well, that's not it.
I really nerd out over the tech, you guys.
That's not it. You can... Okay, so how would you define better? Be better.
Well, the way I like to one thing I found myself doing a lot and still do is comparing myself to other people, and so learning to compare myself to yesterday. So whatever version of David was in like 2023, let's say, really trying to take an honest evaluation of who was I last year and what were maybe some failings or fallings or missteps, and taking some time to evaluate those to avoid them going into 2024 and having that be so that is how I would define better for myself.
Okay. I would say, because this is such a rare opportunity to get people into a physical studio, that it would be awesome if you started off with some breath work and really grounded the yourself and your guest, coming here. And then, like, first of all, that highway of Texas is insane. It's so fast. So I was like super upregulated, and then I was late, and then your dog was so cute, and I just wanted to like cuddle, and I realized I wanted some grounding. So I think maybe that could be helpful for other guests.
I love that suggestion. That's part of the reason in the email invite I put that what to expect when you arrive is because I had a few people tell me that they thought we had to hit record like as soon as they walked through the door. I'm like, that's so stressful. I mean, yeah, we'll get to it in a couple minutes, but I'm not in a rush here,
Yeah.
I did it's funny you bring that up. I just took my first ever breathwork class on Sunday. And one thing that they had us do that was incredibly uncomfortable, ergo good for me, all of us, is they had us walk around the room with our heads down, and you're not allowed to make eye contact with anybody. Do you know where I'm going with this? And then at one point, the facilitator counts down from 5, and when he gets to 0, you look up, and whoever is closest to you, you guys make eye contact. And while you're making eye contact, he sort of went through a scripted, imagine this person as a baby, and he went through just this beautiful little story of them from 0 to adulthood, and the good and the bad that happens, and sort of and I later, as we were doing the breath work, I had the people whose I made eye contact with, their faces were like seared in my head, and not in a distracted way, but I couldn't get them out of there. It was, I had never done that with someone before, but a takeaway that I was talking to my neighbor about is we're having a psychologist who was at that breathwork session come on the show in a couple of months, and tell me what your thoughts are on this. Going up to people and saying, hey, I have a podcast, and I have a psychologist coming on the show, and I'm conducting a social experiment, and I was wondering if you would make eye contact with me without breaking for 60 seconds, and then tell me how you feel afterwards. Is that a little psycho? And then
It depends on what you're wearing, and that's great. Yep, this shirt says forbidden. I would maybe
change the shirt.
Yeah. Carry a clipboard.
And I would be consolidating the data to actually give it to him. So I'm not lying. So one of my questions would be, I asked this of 37 people, 9 people called me crazy, but of the 28 that did it with me, this is sort of the response I got.
I love that. I think to get an appropriate group of people, like you can go to Third Eye Lounge and they will say yes right away. In their practice, they're going to feel like I felt so aligned and attuned. And then you could go to like Capital Factory, which is,
It's a brewery.
It's kind of a tech bro, like incubator, and they might be like, be very triggered and like weirded out, because it'd be interesting to pop around to different subcultures in Austin to do that.
Right. Third Eye Lounge is actually where my first breathwork class was.
Oh, nice. Who did you do it with?
JJ.
Okay, cool. Oh yeah, JJ, not Abrams. JJ
starts with a C, I think.
Yes. Love him though.
Yeah, he's
great.
Good. It was a good first impression of breathwork.
Awesome.
I will go back.
He's one of the best.
Yeah. No, Olivia told me to go to him.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Well, this has been so much fun. Thank you for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Keep going. You're on the right track. I believe in you, and I can't wait to see the full documentary. I can't say that word.
Documentary.
The doc.
The doc, yeah. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, and it was really fun geeking out on all of my favorite things and being able to laugh through a lot of them.
Yes.
It's just so great, It's awesome. So thank you too.
You're welcome. And don't forget, we love trauma. So if you got some and you want to come on the show, we'd love to welcome you. Bye, everyone. Have a good Saturday night.